Good evening, Jonathan members and guests. On behalf of the Reagan Distinguished American Award Committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 16th Reagan Distinguished American Award ceremony. I'm Jack Walston, the chairman of the Reagan Committee. In 1995, I had the privilege of serving as the chairman of this committee when we honored the greatest coach of all time, John R. Wooden. On June 4th of this year, at 99 years of age, Coach Wooden passed away. He, like our awardee this evening, was an individual of extraordinary accomplishment. And he and our awardee tonight have lived lives of profound humility and profound dignity. In keeping with the traditions of our club, may we please have a few moments of silence in the honor of this great American, Coach John Wooden. Thank you. Also, we wish to acknowledge a Reagan honoree who is with us this evening and who, on Christmas Eve of 1968, while circumnavigating the moon for the very first time ever with his fellow astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell, took the world-famous, iconic Earthrise picture. At that time, mankind was not aware of the fact that the probability of these three brave astronauts of ever coming back to Earth safely were only 3 chances out of 5. Ladies and gentlemen, Apollo 8 astronaut, first chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, ambassador to Norway, retired chairman and CEO of General Dynamics Corporation, Major General William A. Anders, and his remarkable wife of over 50 years, Valerie Anders. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce the president of the Jonathan Club, Don Norberg, and our First Lady, Susie. In 1991, the concept of awarding an American who has demonstrated a lifetime achievement was born at the Jonathan Club. This award was first presented to President and Mrs. Reagan in their honor. The award covers the scope of multiple disciplines, including medicine, sports, politics, science, theology, journalism, business, jurisprudence, aviation, exploration, and arts. On the evening of our club's annual 2010 annual meeting, Christina Hearn, immediate past chair of our Reagan Committee, received the acceptance letter from tonight's honoree. Were we all excited? You bet we were. We knew that we were going to have a sellout, but holy Toledo, in 18 and a half minutes? I mean, never in our 115-year history have we had a deluge of reservation requests in such a short period of time. Anyway, I think this is a colossal tribute to tonight's honoree. An American hero, naval officer, test pilot, astronaut extraordinaire, professor, and the first person in history of human existence to set foot on the moon, and whose legacy will forever be in the history book.
We have a liftoff, 36 past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Staging status booster. Go. Fido. Go. Guidance. Go.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
I think that our conquest of space is one of the great stories of the 20th century. Never has there been before, nor will there be, anything like this pioneering adventure.
What a moment. Man on the way to the moon.
On July 20th, 1969, mankind accomplished its single greatest achievement of all time when a naval aviator raised in a farmhouse in Wapakoneta, Ohio, first set foot on another celestial body.
On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped out of an odd-looking spaceship and into the pages of history as the first man on the moon. Today, he remains one of the most famous people on the planet.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Oh boy.
Walter Cronkite captured the moment.
Rolling shaking.
What a moment. Man on the way to the moon.
What did it feel like?
Felt like a train on a bad railroad track and shaking in every direction. And it was loud, really loud.
Neil Armstrong is 75 now, an aging hero, but his winning smile is still there. We remember him as the cool and confident commander of Apollo 11, joined by his crewmates Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins. On a windswept day, we went with Armstrong to an old Apollo launch pad at Kennedy Space Center to hear the story of one of man's greatest adventures. That July morning in 1969 when you came out and you gave that thumbs up, that was a very confident view you put on.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a sham, I admit. You know, the reality is a lot of times you get up there and get in the cockpit and something goes wrong somewhere and you go back down. So actually, when you actually lift off, it's really a big surprise.
Perched atop a Saturn V rocket, they were on their way to meet the challenge President Kennedy made 8 years earlier. It took 400,000 workers and $24 billion, intended in large part to prove American superiority over the Soviets. There was a lot riding on that mission, wasn't there? It was the hopes of a nation riding on that mission.
It was indeed. We wanted to do well. Even more than that, you hope that you as a person don't make any mistakes.
And he didn't. Armstrong's entire life had prepared him well, starting with a childhood fascination with flight. He earned his pilot's license at 16 before he learned to drive. By 21, he was flying combat missions over Korea. After the war, he became a hotshot test pilot, flying the famous X-15 at 4,000 miles an hour to the edge of the atmosphere. It was during that time in 1962 when he faced his most difficult test, losing his 2-year-old daughter Karen to brain cancer. You never quite recover from the death of a child. In that same year of grief, Armstrong was chosen to be an astronaut. He flew his first space mission in 1966 on Gemini 8 and nearly lost his life when his tiny capsule briefly spun out of control. He cheated death again 2 years later while flying an experimental device designed to simulate a lunar landing. When it malfunctioned, Armstrong was sitting at the controls. He ejected barely 100 feet from the ground.
And if you didn't get out, that would have been your life.
Yeah, probably would have.
Yet somebody told me that after that happened, when it was all over, you went back to your office and sat down to do paperwork.
That's true. I did. There was work to be done.
Wait a minute. You were just almost killed.
Well, but I wasn't.
Armstrong stood out, even among a class of astronauts that had the right stuff. His depth of experience and nerves of steel earned him at age 38 the command of Apollo 11. The trip to the moon took 4 days. After achieving lunar orbit, Michael Collins would remain in the command module, while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed into the lunar module, undocked, and began their descent.
00764.
But the landing took an unexpected turn. The onboard guidance system was sending Armstrong and Aldrin right towards disaster.
Our autopilot was taking us into a very large crater about the size of a big football stadium with steep slopes on the crater covered with very large rocks about the size of automobiles. That was not the kind of place I wanted to try to make the first landing.
Armstrong overrode the autopilot and looked for a safe place to land, but the detour cost them precious fuel and they were about to run out.
Please 200 feet, 4.5 down.
A worldwide television audience of nearly 1 billion people was on the edge of their seats.
40 feet down, 2.5, picking up some dust.
The Eagle closed in on the moon.
Houston,
And then this.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Oh, boy. Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
The ghostly image was beyond words. Armstrong paused on the bottom rung of the ladder
I'm going to step off the limb.
and planted his left boot on the lunar dust.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
Do you recall how you came up with that? A small step for a man. What was the inspiration for it?
Well, I thought, well, when I step off, it's just going to be a little step. It's going to be a step from there down to there. But then I thought about all those 400,000 people that had given me the opportunity to make that step, and thought, well, it's going to be a big something for all those folks, and indeed a lot of others that even weren't involved in the project. So it was a kind of a simple correlation of thoughts.
Armstrong and Aldrin spent just a short time on the lunar surface, testing the gravity, completing a long list of experiments, and marking their journey. They had come in peace for all mankind, but stayed less than a day.
God bless you. Good night from Apollo 11.
Driven by dreams and funded by a burning desire to beat the Russians, the first moon landing on July 20th, 1969 was a defining moment in history. Never before had so many people in so many countries watched a single event with such astonishment and wonder.
You know, as I look out over the room, I realize so many of us saw that. A few, maybe not. That was 41 years ago. And you see this, and you just can't help but be moved. All you can say is, wow. Ladies and gentlemen, now please join me in welcoming the 2010 recipient of the Reagan Distinguished American Award, Neil A. Armstrong. Thank you. Please be seated. We would also like to welcome Neil's lovely and engaging, charming wife, Carol, whom I learned on our flight out this morning from Cincinnati in Phil Lyon's beautiful Beechcraft Premier jet. She is one heck of a word puzzle. I mean, she had that USA Today, and she just cooled it. She asked me one question, Jack, I can't quite get this word. Would you try? Oh, boy, I'm embarrassed I couldn't. But she ultimately figured it out before we got to Orange County Airport. Anyway, Carol, delighted you're here. In addition, we would like to recognize Neil's official biographer, Professor James R. Hansen, who authored the New York Times bestseller, First Man, The Life of Neil A. Armstrong, and who, by the way, wrote the essay in your official program. It's terrific. Thank you, Jim, for doing that for us. To deliver tonight's invocation is Monsignor Clement J. Conley of the Holy Family Church in South Pasadena. Monsignor.
Our understanding of prophecy is largely drawn from the Hebrew Scriptures. Biblical scholarship, however, will tell us that prophets do not speak about the future. The prophet is sent to enlighten us about the present age, to give us a deeper and more profound insight into the meaning of life and all of creation today. The prophet is one who is not bound by the certainties of yesterday, who will look into the future with a deep down confidence that his reach can match his vision. The prophet Neil we honor in our gathering tonight. The teacher, the one who inspires, the one who draws us into a deeper understanding of cosmic reality and the presence of a creator in all things. And so our invocation tonight is a blessing of gratitude to Neil the prophet. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Thank you, Monsignor. That was a very moving invocation. Thank you very much. This evening, the colors will be presented by the 311th Sustainment Command, United States Army Reserve, and the singing of the national anthem by Steve Amerson, known as America's tenor, who debuted in Carnegie Hall, has performed on numerous occasions with both the Los Angeles Philharmonic and the Los Angeles Master Chorale, and is a musical ambassador for the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation and Society. And I should add, when he sang the national anthem at our rehearsal a little while ago, it brought tears to my ears. Thank you. Please march forward. My eyes. It's what my ears heard that brought the tears to my eyes. To introduce Mr. Armstrong, please welcome again the Jonathan Club President, Donald Norberg.
Thank you, Jack. Fellow Jonathans and distinguished guests, as we saw in that film clip, none of us will ever forget Walter Cronkite, another Reagan Distinguished Awardee, removing his glasses in his expression of wonderment at what Neil Armstrong accomplished on that evening of July 20th, 1969, the first man to set his foot on the moon. Neil, nearly 1 billion of us on Earth shared the tension as you took your lunar lander off autopilot in order to find the perfect landing spot in the Sea of Tranquility. Successfully accomplish your mission to land, a mission, by the way, that you graded as a 13 on a scale of 10, as your heart was pounding at 160 beats per minute. And then step out of your spacecraft to speak your now famous words, "One small step for mankind, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Today, in the 21st century, we often forget that in the 1960s, America was locked in a Cold War and locked in a space race with Russia, a space race in which Russia had achieved many firsts, including Sputnik and the first man in space. In a few long minutes after landing, then with one small step, Neil, you, your fellow astronauts, with all of your contemporaries at NASA and in the space program, restored immense pride in all America, renewed our nation's spirit and vigor, and set the stage for the optimism and vision 10 years later of our Jonathan Club's Distinguished American Award namesake, Ronald Reagan. Neil, I would now like to read a few letters addressed to you from previous Reagan Distinguished American awardees. First, Nancy Reagan. Dear Neil, although I am unable to join this evening, I am delighted to join your friends and guests of the Jonathan Club in congratulating you as you receive this year's Reagan Distinguished American Award. Even before you became an astronaut, you displayed remarkable courage and patriotism. From your distinguished service as a Navy pilot during the Korean War to your legendary accomplishments as a test pilot, you have been an inspiration. As the first man to walk on the moon, you will forever symbolize America's quest to reach for the stars. You are truly deserving of this recognition, and I know my husband would be proud to know that you are receiving the award that bears his name. Congratulations once again, and thank you for your service to our nation. Have a wonderful evening. Sincerely, Nancy Reagan. From astronaut William Anders, who again is with us tonight. Dear Neil, I am pleased that you will be joining Frank, Jim, and me of the Apollo 8 crew as the recipient of the Jonathan Club's Reagan Distinguished American Award. Congratulations. Valerie and I have enjoyed the fine facilities of this prestigious organization. Sincerely, Bill Anders. A third letter. Dear Neil, I take great pleasure in congratulating you on your selection as this year's recipient of the Reagan Distinguished American Award of the Jonathan Club. The selection committee has certainly made an excellent decision in according you this honor as an outstanding individual and true American hero. I trust that the award will mean as much to you as it did to me when I was so honored some years ago. Unfortunately, other commitments prevented me from attending the dinner. I enjoyed the time we spent together at the National Business Aviation Association convention earlier this month and look forward to seeing you again soon. Sincerely, Arnold Palmer. And another. I have lasting memories of that moment when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. I also remember when I first met Neil, and I was impressed with the humility with which he wore prestige and fame that came with his accomplishment. I have admired him through the years and want to send my warmest congratulations as he is honored with the Reagan Distinguished American Award. Neil, God bless you always. Signed, Billy Graham. And on the letterhead of the Supreme Court of the United States, Dear Dr. Armstrong, I was indeed pleased to learn that you are the 2010 recipient of the Reagan Distinguished American Award. As a past recipient of this award, I wish I could be with you to personally extend to you my congratulations. I noted in refreshing myself about your fascinating career that we share a few experiences. I noted that we are both recipients of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, as well as the Sylvanus Thayer Award presented by the United States Military Academy at West Point. I believe we both enjoy golf, though I didn't see a reference to your hole-in-one, but I'll keep looking. Finally, it appears that with our careers in public service, we have both accumulated a few frequent flyer miles. Again, congratulations and enjoy your evening. You will be treated warmly by the members of the Jonathan Club. Sincerely, Sandra Day O'Connor. Mr. Armstrong, there may be no man on this planet whose name is better known than yours, especially here in Hollywood, California.
People should know this stuff. So first up, some best moments from the people we've met in the last 17 years at J1. Take a look.
Who was the first man on the moon? Armstrong.
That's right. What was his first name?
Louis.
Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong.
Louis, it is now our pleasure to present to you our 2010 honoree, a medallion handcrafted by Tiffany & Company specifically for the Reagan Distinguished American Award. Let me read for you the inscription on the medallion. Awarded by the Jonathan Club to those whose contributions to our nation best exemplify the qualities which the club has cherished since its inception. Neil, if I may ask you, we would like to place the medallion around your neck. The Eagle has landed. Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Armstrong. Thank you so much. Oh, all right. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for that magnificent warm welcome. It is very much appreciated. In the summer of 1968, the National Governors Conference convened in Cincinnati. The governor of Ohio requested NASA to permit me to act as one of Ohio's hosts to that gathering. NASA, ever politically astute, agreed to the governor's request. And so I found myself attending both the open and the closed sessions of the conference, of that august body. I was immediately struck by the vitality, the acumen, and the intellectual breadth of the clear leader of those debates, the governor of California, Ronald Reagan. 2 decades later, President Reagan appointed me as vice chairman of the Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. And thereafter, I enjoyed a number of memorable meetings with him and with Mrs. Reagan. So I am particularly honored and personally pleased to receive the Reagan Distinguished American Award and have my name added to that exceptional list of recipients. I'd like to spend our brief time together tonight talking about something which you are all very familiar, a subject to which we are exposed daily in both the print and broadcast news. Earlier this year, I and several other flyers received an invitation from the Defense Department to visit our military aviation facilities in the Middle East. Our principal responsibility would be to convey to the military aviation units the appreciation of the American public. 2 tours were conducted, the first in March and the second early this month. The tours were coordinated by Morale Entertainment of this city and of the USO. The first tour would feature 5 aviators, included Jim Lovell, Bill Anders' associate and recipient of this wonderful award in 1994. He was a crew member of Apollo 8 with Bill and commander of the ill-fated Apollo 13. Bob Gilliland, the Lockheed Martin senior pilot on the SR-71 Blackbird. Brigadier General Steve Ritchie, the only Air Force ace in the Vietnam conflict. Gene Cernan, who commanded the last Apollo flight to land on the moon, and myself. The second tour would be only the three astronauts. For both tours, our moderator was David Hartman, who many of you will remember as the host of ABC's Good Morning America during its first 11 years, and an Air Force veteran. In Germany, we visited Landstuhl Medical Center, Regional Medical Center, which is the largest American hospital outside the United States. There certainly were many combat wounded there. When we asked the military patients what they wanted to do when they recovered, their answer was nearly universal. I want to get back to my unit. One lad had been the victim of an IED explosion. The staff believed he had the most serious injuries of anyone ever to survive at that hospital. One leg gone at the knee, one leg gone at the thigh, and every internal organ in his body severely damaged. He didn't open his eyes, and he couldn't speak, but he could give a thumbs up as a response to our questions. It was certainly an emotional and appropriate way to begin our tour. We stopped at Incirlik Air Base in Adana, Turkey, not far from Syria's northern border. The USA has a great deal of activity there. The number of aircraft on the tarmac was remarkable. It indeed was a big operation. Even though it was the middle of the working day, our dog and pony show drew a good-sized crowd. We talked about the world of flight to these aviation people, expressed the gratitude of the American people for their dedication, and responded to questions of all types. The State Department had been trying to get some NASA lectures at Adana's Çukurova University, the third largest university in Turkey, for several years without success. When we showed up, State shanghaied those of us associated with NASA into going to the university and into a political maelstrom. 2 days earlier, our House Foreign Affairs Committee had voted to approve the Armenian Genocide Resolution, and the following day, Turkey recalled its U.S. ambassador. Now, we're going to a large university in Turkey with lots of reporters, TV cameramen eager, no doubt, to hear our views on this international spat. We had no information on the issues, but it seemed peculiar to us. The Armenian deaths would have been in 1915 during the Ottoman Empire, prior to Turkey's complete overhaul under Ataturk, who made it a secular democratic state, changed from Arabic to a Latin-based alphabet, adopted European clothing, banned polygamy, gave women rights, etc., etc. The current Turkish administration seems to be nudging the country, which is 97% Muslim, back toward a more fundamental Islamic state, but there is much internal opposition to such action. And for the United States to be aiding the fundamentalist forces with this resolution seemed at very best to be strange. As it turned out, our fears were unwarranted. The university crowds were wildly enthusiastic about space exploration, and the journalists had no opportunity to ask questions about these contentious issues, which we would have been ill prepared to comment. At Ali al-Salam in Kuwait, only about 25 miles from the Iraqi border, it was obvious that war is a matter of logistics. In addition to dozens of Air Force cargo jets and Atlas Air 747s, FedEx DC-10s and MD-11s were arriving 5 times each day. This was a major entry point into Iraq, and we had lots of opportunity to talk with those who were departing or returning from their combat tour there. During our first tour, our visit to Iraq was canceled to the Iraqi parliamentary elections, and the American security forces were tied up guarding all the polling places, and they couldn't support us. But during the second tour, we flew into Balat, a former Iraqi Air Force base north of Baghdad. There are now 18,000 Americans stationed there on the base, down from a peak of 24,000, with only 3 dining rooms. That's a busy dining room. Everyone seemed to believe that Iraq had been substantially stabilized and the situation much improved. There were still some bad guys out there firing mortars and exploding car bombs and planting roadside IEDs. But with the F-16s with their smart bombs and the Predators continuously watching for the bad guys at work, the confidence level is high. Many of the people we talked to were on their 3rd, 4th, or 5th deployment. They were disciplined about their work, enthusiastic about their chances for success. We traveled to Al Udeid, an airbase in Qatar that admittedly I did not even know existed. The action was like LAX or Heathrow. The 399th Air Expeditionary Force accounted for a fair number of airplanes on the tarmac. I saw a summary chart of their activity for last year, 2009. It included 19,000 hours of combat and combat support flying, 200 aeromedical evacuations with 780 patients, 44,000 air-to-air refuelings. Their monthly average air delivery was 1,000 tons of cargo and 600,000 passengers. And that was just one airbase and one wing. It is a big war. I took particular interest in visiting the B-1 bomber squadron that was based there. In the past, I'd had the opportunity to fly that magnificent flying machine a couple of times, and my company, AIL Systems, was a prime contractor on the B-1, providing the defensive electronics and the radar jamming systems. And I was delighted to learn that it was doing a superb job over Afghanistan. I took the opportunity to write a few notes to the Taliban and Monsieur bin Laden on the smart bombs that were in the bomb bays of the B-1s. In our first trip, we flew out to the nuclear-powered carrier, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. And on the second, we visited the Harry S. Truman. We overnighted there and had the chance to watch combat operations. We stood at the catapults while the Hornet strike fighters, loaded with armaments, were launched for Afghanistan. Typically a 6 to 7 hour flight from the carrier to the Pakistani coast, then through an air corridor known as the Boulevard to the Afghan airspace and the airspace targets, then back through the Boulevard to the carrier with 3 air-to-air refuelings along the way. We had the opportunity to watch up close and personal the landings of these magnificent men and their flying machines. There is nothing in modern warfare that is more awesome than the action on a carrier deck during combat operations. The carriers each had a crew of between 4,000 and 5,000 individuals, 15% of which are women. We dined with the sailors, the chiefs, the officers, and they were impressive at every level. I was proud to be in their company. We planned to go into Afghanistan, but it was not to be. A major operation was initiated at that time, at the time we were to enter, and we were unable to get clearance. Nevertheless, we learned a lot about what was happening from talking to many who had spent a great deal of time there. Clearly, Afghanistan is where the action is. Alexander the Great incurred enormous losses in trying to conquer the fierce Afghans, as did Tamerlane and Babur. The British initiated 3 wars against the Afghans in their empire-building years to reduce growing Russian influence in the region. In the first of those wars, a decade before our own Civil War, a British force of 16,000 soldiers retreating through deep snow were systematically annihilated, with only 1 man surviving. And of course, you'll all remember the Soviet Union's difficult invasion and failed occupation of Afghanistan, in which the U.S. supported the insurgents, the Mujahideen. History records it is a difficult place to fight. Afghanistan is a landlocked Asian country about the size of Texas, with probably 20% more population than Texas has. It's a 99% Muslim country, and it's overwhelmingly rural. There's very high unemployment and a very high level of illiteracy. 44% of the population is 16 years of age or younger. The principal ethnic groups are the Pashtun, the Uzbek, and the Tajik, with a number of smaller groups, each with their own language. Each of the groups is composed of a number of tribes. We learned that a key to understanding the Afghan people and some other Islamic societies is to understand their order of values. At the top of the list, Allah. Allah is great. Allah is great. Allah will take care of you. Second, the family and the extended family. That's the second level. Next, the tribe and the tribal leadership, followed by local and regional government, and lastly, the Afghan national government. In the eyes of the typical Afghani, the least important component of society is the national Afghan government. The most important is the family and the tribe. Education is minimal for boys and often non-existent for girls. The education that does exist consists largely of religious instruction. Both socialism and capitalism are scorned by the mullahs teaching the students. Those who are elected to high office are much less important to the normal Afghani than the people of his family and the leaders of his tribe. So we can begin to understand why there is little attraction there to the concept of voting and democracy. It is irrelevant to many. You know about the poppy problem. Even if a farmer has an interest in trying alternate crops, the Taliban is likely to order him to grow poppies. They threaten that failure to do so will result in a loss of a member of their family. One solution being considered is to license poppy growing for pharmaceutical needs, just as it is already done in India and Australia and Turkey. The Afghan insurgency was caused by disintegrating governance and a virulent religious ideology. The Taliban, from the word talib meaning Islamic student who seeks knowledge, originated in 1994 and recruited students in Afghan refugee camps in Pakistan. Their purpose was to restore peace, enforce Sharia or Islamic law, and defend the Islamic character of Afghanistan. And as you know, they grew and slowly but successfully controlled larger and larger parts of their country. The country has much fertile ground. There is large snowfall accumulation, but in the spring and summer the snow just melts and runs into the rivers. And there are few reservoirs or irrigation systems. The power in the community is the patriarch, who has many sons and many more grandsons. He has the esteem of the villagers and much of the power. A young man wants to have enough money to get married and have children. And when he has enough money, he can have another wife and more children. And if he prospers, he may take a third and a fourth. Young, uneducated men with nothing to do are easily influenced by the Taliban, which can offer him money, position, and a religious basis for his participation in their activities. An interesting possibility was suggested by an Air Force colonel who had visited Afghanistan 52 times and had spent much time in the villages talking with the elders. His suggestion was to hire young men for 25 cents a day. Give them a wheelbarrow and a shovel and have them build reservoirs and waterways. After certain tenure in that job, he would earn title to a small tract of land that would have irrigation available. And that would give him the opportunity to be a property owner, grow crops, raise goats, raise a family, and have the hope of being a respected leader in his community. It would be counterproductive, the colonel thought, to have bulldozers build the reservoirs. The purpose was to employ a large number of young men who would have a feeling of accomplishment, earning a living and building a family. You read much about the value of providing more education to Afghans. The colonel was not so certain. He thought that the evidence suggests that a quality education would likely cause a young person to leave Afghanistan for a country that would provide employment and appreciate his or her skills. And the country would lose valuable citizens. Let's assume that our policies and military actions are successful. Whether you subscribe to the concept of introducing democracy and building schools, or favor the idea of developing jobs and opportunities that are more acceptable to the local culture, there will be much to do after the conflict is over. And it will be challenging. I claim no expertise in these matters, whatever. I saw many things, but I could not see everything. My observations are just those of a fellow American who had an opportunity to get closer to the conflict and sharpen my interest in this enormous investment in the global future by our country and by all of us. We gave presentations to over 20,000 people. In my conversations with the military personnel, all the way from the airmen and the sailors to the admirals and the generals, I could identify nothing that really genuinely concerned me. They were universally skillful, brave, dedicated, thoughtful, civil, and I was proud of them. After our presentation to American and British airmen in Bahrain, an island kingdom in the Persian Gulf, we boarded a bus for our departure. Following us onto the bus, 6 strapping American fighting men in camo, each who had been in combat in Iraq or Afghanistan, stood ramrod straight, one beside each of us, who had conveyed the thanks of the American people to them minutes earlier. On command and with military precision, each presented us their thank you gift. It was something that had flown over their combat unit in Iraq. It was this. I vowed that on appropriate occasions, this banner would once again wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
John Swihart, would you please keep standing when everyone else sits down, please? All of our Reagan awardees have had their portraits painted by this gentleman here. He's world-renowned artist. And after tonight's ceremony, Neil's portrait will also be alongside with the portraits of all of the other Reagan awardees whose portraits you'll find in the Reagan Room. Neil, if we may we ask you to have a picture taken with the 300th United States Army Band, 63rd Regional, after we take the portrait. Thank you. Let's step over here, Neil. Please keep standing for the retirement of the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have witnessed an historic and proud moment in the long history of our club. The presentation of the Reagan Distinguished American Award to Neil A. Armstrong. This brings our ceremony to a conclusion. Please remain standing while Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong adjourn from the room.